It's really cool to me that Dave created this whole universe, this Blackmoor world that we could play in. Of course, it's all fantasy, but it's actually been a great source of pleasure, I guess is the way to put it.
It was interesting that we kept it going that long. It was the longest running fantasy role-playing campaign ever.
It was almost like a mutual mentoring. I mean, in the sense of, it wasn't like Dave Wesley was saying, you know, Dave is the godfather and I'm the student or something. But it wasn't the other way around either. I think it was one of these things where they both recognized the unique talents of each, and maybe to some extent where one of them had talents where the other one didn't have it.
David Wesley won't publish his variation of Totten's rules until 1970. By this point, the Twin Cities gamers have created their own type of role-playing wargame. In Strategos N, Wesley assumes other gamers will understand the scope of roleplay that his group is using when they play their games. He makes just one cryptic reference to role-playing in a passage where Totten's instructions to referees are paraphrased, without a complete explanation of what the home playstyle entails. It is doubtful anyone else will understand that Strategos N is a type of role-playing game due to this oversight.
They're going to have a cavalry charge against a formation of enemy troops standing on a hill. And you would go, okay, you've got 1,600 cavalry and they're worth 4 points apiece for this, times 3 for that. That's 12 times 1,692,000, or 19,200. And the defenders have got 800 troops, and their guard grenadiers, therefore they're worth 6 points apiece. And you're attacking uphill, and that doubles their strength. But they're tired, and that reduces them by, you know, and you'd go through the factors that would influence it. So instead of walking through all the steps and showing how it happened, you just sit there in your wisdom as the referee, you compute it, and then you say, all right, the cavalry sweep up the hill, and the infantry on the top of the hill see them coming, and your colonel there in the square gives an impassioned speech to his men about, remember, they're not taking any prisoners, and you fire a mighty volley into the oncoming cavalry, and they break and fall back. And it's much more exciting to hear that than number, difference is 3, therefore you win by, right? You don't know whether he won because you roll a really weak number, or he won because he's got really tough troops.
Wesley's interpretation of Totten seems to expand the concept. In Wesley's games, players have complete agency. They're allowed to do anything they can think of.
If you are confronted by a river you find is flowing too high for you to cross it with your artillery, if some lieutenant said, well, wait a moment, there's a farm over there. I can tear down the barn and use the timbers to make a bridge across the river. The referee should not say, I don't plan on that, you don't get to do it. The player is asking for something, and then the referee is supposed to imagine what the answer should be.
Additionally, the sense of self that is emerging out of their battles seems to reveal glimmers of what will come later, as players begin to identify with their personas as leaders of armies.
In historical miniatures gaming, you would have these units of figures, but you would also have the personality figure of your general, and you would play that general. And when he was wounded in battle, quite often the owner of that figure would cut the poor figure's leg off. I can remember one French officer in particular who wound up with a miniature eye patch, a hook, and a peg leg.
We were actually developing individual characters that Lieutenant Fromage of the 7th Hussars, a little 4-figure unit out there in the middle. We used these characters to explain events that happened that were maybe a little out of the ordinary.
We had a certain amount of humor that was injected in stuff. The ship were having a naval battle, and the warships are firing at each other, and the British ship gets the upper hand, and it looks like the French ship really should have surrendered, but an adverse die roll shows that the French miraculously have continued to fight. Instead of just saying, look at that, he rolled boxcars, right? You elaborate it with something like, yes, the cowardly captain reaches and says, take down the colors, whereupon the people's representative from the French government shoots him with his pistol and screams, no, those colors stay on the mast, nail them to the mast. After a little while, these little non-player characters, to use Dungeons & Dragons terminology, that we have populated a game with, and they kind of get trotted back out again when certain circumstances that remind you of them occur. Somebody go, it must be Fromage at work, or whatever, right?
Although many members of their club are taking turns either being a player or a referee, David Wesley emerges as the primary game master in the group. Wesley is the one who creates these innovations in play method that are his reinterpretation of Tauten's Strategos. All accounts of Arneson during this time are of a young man who is becoming a very formidable commander in their war games.
He wasn't overly impetuous. I remember a game I set up. We had a force of cavalry on each side, and I said, okay, there's big open area down there around the stream. And Arneson says, can I send scouts down to check out if there's a ford or something? I said, yeah. Meanwhile, the other player says, well, I'm charging down through there and across the stream, and I'm gonna catch him standing. And this is exactly what I was kind of hoping for, because the whole bottom of the valley was a swamp, and he just charged right into the swamp. That was far ahead of what most of our fellow players were doing, to be honest with you. Arneson thought to send out scouts.
You either had to ask, you had to figure it out. I think it was that aspect that made it as close to reality as you could get it without exploding minds in the, in the conference room.
We'd already worked out, and when it comes to finding people who could referee a battle, that the burden of paperwork and knowing the rules well meant a lot of people didn't want to do that. They just wanted to play. Of the people who were willing to undertake the burden, only a few actually seemed to have a knack for it, and Dave Arneson was one of the more prominent ones. Arneson's a very good storyteller guy, very imaginative, and there were a couple of others. So that style of refereeing did not really work out well for a lot of, without a few people who were really eager to run things, right, and to invent situations and come up with quirky twists of fate and things.
In the fall of 1967, the group undergoes a dramatic social upheaval. David Wesley leaves the Twin Cities for Kansas, where he will be working toward a master's degree.
Talking about Dave Arneson in an interesting time here, because Dave is 21 years old.
And he is evolving from being the brilliant but socially inept teenager into becoming the, particularly since now I've left and I've gone off to college, he is no question about the dominant figure among the people who are meeting for gaming centered around his house. While there are rival groups in the Twin Cities by that point, because once everybody left Greg's, we fragmented in several ways. But David is the dominant figure in the gaming with the people that are mostly going to be coming to my game. And so he has emerged as a leadership position within the gaming circle of people his age and younger. Okay.
When the group would get together in the basement of the house on Hartford Avenue, then I could hear his voice above some of the others as they were arguing about something. And I think as a result of that, I think he became kind of the leader in one sense. And I guess the fact that they did meet at our house quite often kind of made him a leader also. Well, come on over to my house, come on over to my house. But I think that's, in a sense, he got forced into being the leader because it was in his house and he was kind of running the show.